Anna Castellanos had been an investigative journalist for 14 years, and she'd broken some big stories: political corruption, corporate fraud, environmental scandals. But nothing prepared her for what started with a single anonymous email on a Tuesday morning in March 2023. An email that would lead her to uncover a conspiracy so vast and so protected that publishing it would turn her into a target. Anna worked for the Arizona Tribune, a mid-sized paper that still believed in real investigative journalism. She was at her desk, drinking her third coffee of the morning, when the email came through. The subject line was simple: "You need to look into Clearwater Development." No name, no signature, just a throwaway email address that would probably never be used again. Anna almost deleted it. She got dozens of tips every week, most of them going nowhere, but something made her open it. The email contained a single attachment, a PDF of a land deal contract between Clearwater Development and the state of Arizona. At first glance, it looked routine. The state was selling a large parcel of land outside Phoenix to Clearwater for development. The price seemed reasonable. Everything looked legitimate, but Anna's investigative instincts were tingling. Why would someone send this anonymously if there was nothing wrong with it? She started digging. Clearwater Development was a relatively new company, incorporated just 3 years earlier. Their website showed several completed projects, mostly commercial developments and housing communities, nothing suspicious on the surface. But when Anna pulled the company's ownership records, things got interesting. Clearwater was owned by a holding company, which was owned by another holding company, which led to a web of LLCs and shell corporations that would take days to untangle. Someone had gone to great lengths to hide who actually owned Clearwater. Anna spent the next week following the money. She traced corporate filings, cross-referenced board members, searched property records, and interviewed people in the real estate development community. Slowly, a picture emerged. Buried beneath 5 layers of corporate structures, Clearwater Development was partially owned by a man named Thomas Whitmore. That name made Anna's heart race. Thomas Whitmore was the brother-in-law of Arizona's governor, Richard Chen. This land deal wasn't just routine. It was potentially the governor selling state land to his own family. But Anna needed more than connections. She needed proof of wrongdoing. She pulled the records of the land sale and compared them to similar state land deals over the past 5 years. The parcel sold to Clearwater was valued at $8 million. Anna found 3 independent appraisals from the past 2 years that valued the same land at somewhere between $18 and $22 million. The state had sold the land for less than half its actual value. That was the first concrete evidence of potential fraud. Anna kept digging. She discovered that the land sale had been approved through an expedited process that bypassed the usual public comment period and competitive bidding requirements. The authorization for that expedited process came directly from the governor's office. More red flags. Anna interviewed former state employees who'd worked on land deals, and several of them, speaking anonymously, said they'd never seen a sale push through that quickly without proper oversight. Then Anna found the smoking gun. She obtained emails through a public records request showing communication between the governor's chief of staff and the state land commissioner. The emails discussed the Clearwater deal, specifically with the chief of staff instructing the land commissioner to expedite this through whatever means necessary and to keep public exposure minimal. One email explicitly mentioned that the governor has a personal interest in seeing this deal close quickly. Anna had enough. This was corruption at the highest level of state government. Anna brought everything to her editor, a tough, veteran journalist named Patricia Holmes, who'd been in the business for 30 years. Patricia reviewed the evidence, asked hard questions, and finally nodded. "This is solid, but Anna, you understand what you're taking on here? The governor's office will come at you with everything they've got. Are you ready for that?" Anna had exposed corrupt officials before. She knew the drill. "I'm ready. This needs to see daylight." But first, Anna did what good journalists do. She reached out to the governor's office for comment. She sent a detailed list of questions about the land deal, the relationship between the governor and Clearwater's ownership, the expedited approval process, and the below-market sale price. She gave them 48 hours to respond. The response came in 24, and it was aggressive. A terse statement from the governor's press secretary denying any impropriety, claiming the sale price was determined by independent assessment and warning that any defamatory accusations would be met with legal action. Anna had expected denial. What she hadn't expected was what came next. The day after she sent her questions to the governor's office, Anna started noticing things: a car that seemed to be following her, the same sedan, different drivers, always a few cars back. Her email account had a login attempt from an IP address in Virginia. Her apartment building's security cameras mysteriously malfunctioned for 3 hours. Anna had covered enough stories to know what surveillance looked like. Someone was watching her, and they wanted her to know it. Anna documented everything and reported it to the police. They took a report, but were dismissive. "Probably just coincidence, ma'am, but we'll keep an eye out." Anna knew it wasn't coincidence. The story was about to publish in 3 days, and someone was trying to intimidate her into backing off. It had the opposite effect. Anna worked harder, verified every fact twice, and made sure her evidence was airtight. Nobody was going to silence this story through threats. The article ran on a Sunday morning. Front page above the fold. Governor Chen, connected to suspicious land, deal benefiting family. Anna laid out everything methodically: the ownership structure of Clearwater Development, the relationship to the governor, the below-market sale price, the rushed approval process, the emails showing direct involvement from the governor's office. It was devastating, thoroughly documented, and impossible to dismiss as speculation. By noon, the story had been picked up by every major news outlet in the state. By evening, it was national news. The governor's office went into crisis mode. They held a press conference where Governor Chen angrily denied any wrongdoing, claimed he had no knowledge of his brother-in-law's involvement in Clearwater, and accused the Tribune of politically motivated character assassination. He announced he was suing the newspaper for defamation. His supporters flooded social media, attacking Anna personally, calling her a hack, claiming she was biased against the governor. It was a coordinated assault on her credibility, but Anna had prepared for this. She released additional documents backing up every claim in her article. She did interviews with other news outlets, calmly presenting her evidence and responding to the governor's denials with facts. Other journalists started investigating, finding more questionable deals and connections. Within a week, 3 state legislators called for an independent investigation. The Attorney General from the opposing party announced a formal inquiry into the land sale. Then the real retaliation began. Anna started receiving threatening messages, emails telling her to watch her back, anonymous calls to her phone at all hours. Someone vandalized her car, spray painting "liar" across the driver's side. Her social media accounts were hacked and filled with obscene content before she could regain control. Anna reported everything to police, but the threats kept coming. She started varying her routine, checking for followers, looking over her shoulder constantly. The stress was immense. The Tribune stood by Anna publicly, but behind the scenes, pressure was building. The newspaper's owners were receiving calls from powerful people connected to the governor. Advertisers were threatening to pull their business. The governor's lawsuit was going to be expensive to defend. Patricia called Anna into her office. "Anna, the owners are getting nervous. The lawsuit, the controversy, it's costing us. They want to know if you're absolutely certain about every detail in your story." Anna felt betrayed. "Patricia, you reviewed everything before we published. You know this story is solid." Patricia looked exhausted. "I know, but between you and me, there's talk of settling the lawsuit and issuing a retraction. The owners don't want a prolonged legal battle." Anna couldn't believe it. "A retraction? Patricia, everything in that story is true and documented. We can't retract truth because powerful people are angry about it." Patricia nodded slowly. "I agree, but I'm telling you what I'm hearing. Be prepared." Anna left that meeting knowing her own newspaper might abandon her to protect their bottom line. The Attorney General's investigation moved forward despite pressure from the governor's allies. Investigators subpoenaed documents, interviewed state employees, and examined the land deal in detail. What they found was even worse than Anna had reported. The Clearwater deal was just one of several suspicious land sales, all involving companies connected to the governor's family and political donors. The pattern of corruption went back years. The state had lost tens of millions of dollars through below-market sales and no-bid contracts. Anna continued reporting on each new revelation, but the personal cost was mounting. She couldn't sleep, constantly anxious about the threats. Her relationship with her partner was strained by the stress. Some of her friends distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the controversy surrounding her. Anna felt increasingly isolated. The Tribune's support was wavering. The governor's allies were relentless in their attacks. Some days, Anna wondered if breaking this story had been worth destroying her life. Then something unexpected happened. One of the governor's own staff members contacted Anna through an encrypted messaging app. This person, who insisted on absolute anonymity, had worked in the governor's office for 3 years and had watched the corruption firsthand. They provided Anna with internal documents showing that Governor Chen had personally directed multiple questionable deals, had used his position to benefit family members and donors, and had actively worked to cover up evidence of wrongdoing. This whistleblower was risking their career and possibly their freedom to expose the truth. Anna verified every document the whistleblower provided. She cross-referenced them with public records, interviewed other sources, and built an even stronger case. The second story ran 6 weeks after the first. New documents show Governor Chen directed multiple corrupt deals. This article was even more damaging than the first, with internal emails and memos showing clear criminal intent. The public reaction was explosive. Protests erupted at the state capitol. Editorial boards across the state called for the governor's resignation. Several prominent members of the governor's own party publicly withdrew their support. The Attorney General's investigation concluded with a referral for criminal prosecution. A grand jury was convened to consider charges against Governor Chen and several of his associates. The evidence was overwhelming: fraud, abuse of office, conspiracy, multiple felonies that could result in years in prison. The governor's political career was over, but he wasn't going down quietly. His final act of retaliation was directed at Anna. The governor's legal team filed an expanded lawsuit against Anna personally, not just the Tribune. They claimed she had acted with malicious intent and reckless disregard for truth, seeking $20 million in damages. It was a slapsuit, a strategic lawsuit designed to silence journalists through expensive litigation. Anna would need her own lawyer, face years of legal battles, and potentially lose everything, even though her reporting was completely accurate. The message was clear. This is what happens when you expose powerful people. Anna's story resonated beyond Arizona. Journalist organizations rallied to her defense. A legal defense fund was established, raising hundreds of thousands of dollars from people who believed in protecting press freedom. Major news outlets wrote stories about Anna's investigation and the retaliation she faced. She became a symbol of courageous journalism in an era when reporting the truth came with serious personal risks. But the attention and support didn't eliminate the threats or the legal danger Anna faced. The criminal trial of Governor Chen lasted 2 months. Anna testified about her investigation and the evidence she'd uncovered. The former governor's defense team tried to discredit her, but the documents spoke for themselves. The jury deliberated for 3 days before returning guilty verdicts on 7 counts of fraud and abuse of office. Governor Chen was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. His brother-in-law received 8 years. Several other co-conspirators received sentences ranging from 3 to 6 years. The Tribune's lawsuit was dismissed after the criminal convictions, with the judge noting that Anna's reporting had been accurate, well-sourced, and clearly in the public interest. The personal lawsuit against Anna was also dismissed under Arizona's anti-SLAPP statute. She'd won legally and professionally. But the victory felt hollow after everything she'd endured. Anna had spent 18 months under constant threat, watching her life fall apart, questioning whether standing up for truth was worth the cost. Anna took a month off after the trial concluded. She needed to recover, physically and emotionally. The stress had taken a toll on her health. She'd lost weight, developed anxiety that required medication, and struggled with nightmares about the threats and surveillance she'd experienced. Her relationship had survived but was damaged. Some friendships hadn't made it through. The cost of her investigation had been measured not just in professional terms, but in her personal well-being and sense of security. When Anna returned to work, she found that her reputation had been transformed. She was no longer just another investigative journalist. She was the journalist who'd taken down a governor, who'd faced serious retaliation and hadn't backed down. Job offers came in from major national publications. She was invited to speak at journalism conferences, to teach classes on investigative reporting, to consult on other corruption cases. The story that had nearly destroyed her had also made her career. But Anna struggled with what came next. She'd accomplished something significant, exposed real corruption, sent criminals to prison, but the personal cost haunted her. She started speaking publicly about the realities of investigative journalism, about the threats reporters face, about the inadequate protections for journalists who expose powerful people. She became an advocate for press freedom and whistleblower protections, using her platform to push for systemic changes. 1 year after the governor's conviction, Anna received a letter from the anonymous whistleblower who'd provided the internal documents. The person had resigned from government work and moved to another state, still fearful of retaliation. The letter thanked Anna for having the courage to publish the story, for giving the whistleblowers evidence the public exposure it needed. "I couldn't stay silent anymore," the letter read. "Watching the corruption, knowing people were being hurt by it, I had to do something, but I couldn't do it alone. You gave my information power. You gave it purpose. Thank you for being brave enough to face what came after. Anna kept that letter in her desk drawer. On hard days, when she questioned her choices, she'd read it again. The whistleblower had taken enormous risks to expose wrongdoing, and Anna had honored that courage by refusing to be silenced. Together, they'd achieved something neither could have done alone. That partnership between source and journalist, built on trust and shared commitment to truth, was at the heart of why journalism mattered. Anna eventually accepted a position with a national investigative journalism organization. She continued reporting on corruption and abuse of power, but now with more resources and institutional support, she mentored young journalists, teaching them not just how to investigate, but how to protect themselves from retaliation. She shared the hard lessons she'd learned about the personal cost of this work and the importance of building support systems before you need them. 3 years after her first story on Governor Chen, Anna published a book about the investigation and its aftermath. Dangerous Truth: What It Costs to Expose Corruption became a bestseller and required reading in journalism schools. Anna used the book tour to advocate for stronger protections for journalists and whistleblowers, for laws that would make it harder to use litigation to silence reporting, for better support systems for reporters who face threats. The Arizona Tribune won a Pulitzer Prize for Anna's reporting on the governor's corruption. Anna accepted the award on behalf of the entire team that had supported the investigation, including Patricia Holmes, who'd fought behind the scenes to keep the paper from backing down. In her acceptance speech, Anna was direct. This award celebrates the exposure of corruption, but we need to acknowledge the broken system that allows corruption to flourish and punishes those who expose it. Real journalism requires courage, but it shouldn't require journalists to sacrifice their safety, their health, and their peace of mind. Anna's investigation led to broader reforms in Arizona. New oversight measures for state land deals were implemented. Stronger ethics requirements for state officials were passed. Anonymous reporting systems allowed state employees to report corruption without fear of retaliation. The changes were modest, but they were real. Anna's work had created accountability where none had existed before. One corrupt governor was in prison, and the system was slightly harder to exploit. It wasn't perfect, but it mattered. Anna continued her work, investigating corruption wherever she found it. She never forgot the fear she had felt during those months of threats and surveillance. She never forgot the isolation when institutions she'd trusted wavered in their support. But she also never forgot why she'd become a journalist: to hold power accountable, to expose wrongdoing, to give voice to truth even when powerful people wanted it silenced. That mission hadn't changed, even if her understanding of its costs had deepened. Young journalists would ask Anna if she'd do it all again, knowing what it would cost her. Anna's answer was always the same: I didn't have a choice. When you uncover evidence of serious corruption, you can't just look away because exposing it might be dangerous. That's not journalism. That's complicity. So yes, I'd do it again, but I'd also want future journalists to have better protections than I had. Nobody should have to choose between doing their job and staying safe. Anna's story became a rallying point for press freedom advocates. Her experience illustrated the retaliation that journalists face and the courage required to continue investigating despite threats. But it also showed that powerful people could be held accountable, that thorough documentation and persistent reporting could overcome even coordinated efforts at suppression. Anna had proved that truth, backed by evidence and published with integrity, was more powerful than intimidation. 5 years after breaking the Clearwater development story, Anna was invited back to Arizona to speak at a journalism conference. She stood in front of hundreds of reporters, editors, and students and shared the most important lesson she'd learned. The truth is powerful, but it's also dangerous to those who profit from lies. Expect retaliation. Prepare for it. Build support systems. Document everything. And never, ever back down from a story just because powerful people want you to. That's when the story matters most. The standing ovation lasted several minutes. Anna looked out at the faces of journalists who understood the risks, who'd faced their own versions of intimidation and pressure. These were people committed to holding power accountable despite the personal costs. They were the guardians of truth in a world where powerful interests constantly worked to suppress it. And Anna was honored to stand among them, knowing that her investigation had contributed to a tradition of courageous journalism that would continue long after her own career ended. Anna's final thought on the entire experience came years later. In a quiet moment of reflection, someone had asked if the price had been too high. If any story was worth what she'd endured, Anna had thought about the governor in prison for his crimes, about the reforms that had been implemented, about the whistleblower who'd found the courage to come forward, about the young journalists inspired by her example. And she'd answered simply, democracy requires accountability. Accountability requires journalism. And journalism requires courage. The price was high, but paying it was the only choice I could live with. If Anna's story made you think about the real cost of truth, if it made you wonder what else powerful people are hiding, then subscribe immediately. Next week, I'm bringing you the story of the prosecutor who tried to bring down an entire crime family and paid a price that will shock you to your core. The system failed, but she didn't give up. Drop a comment and tell me, would you have published that story knowing what it would cost? Would you risk everything for the truth? Hit that like button and let's keep amplifying the voices of people who refuse to be silenced. See you next week.